everybody, happy Thursday evening. Hope everybody's having a great evening. So let's discuss tonight's debates with Biden and Trump. They were quite interesting. However, let's point out the main differences and what exactly happened. And I will also add some Russian additional information that many are not aware of and provide you my analysis of what exactly is happening. So let's get back to tonight's debate. Today was a very different type of debate because for the first time the microphones were muted. Each party had 2 minutes of interrupted time or 30 seconds of interrupted time, and then the microphones were muted. It was done as far as ABCs, and as per them it actually stated based on the fact, so that way there's no interruptions, and Trump's camp is hoping Biden will make some very big errors during the debate or state something, so that way, because last time there was a debate and I watched it, Trump was interrupting Biden non-stop. It was actually a little painful to watch. I'll also leave a link to the full debate underneath my video if someone missed it. So let's get back to the main topics of the debate. First of all, coronavirus. It has been on forefront of all the news, discussions, policies of many nations, and of course US coming up on election November 3rd. Coronavirus numbers continue to spike in certain regions. Trump mentioned that in a few weeks possible there will be a vaccine to protect everybody and they could start vaccination. And he will also mention the vaccines are US vaccines. He's working with European partners, but at this point even his own administration, his own advisor said that the vaccine is not ready as of yet. Everybody's rushing for the vaccine. However, for example, and I'll leave a link to this as well, Aztec was testing one of their vaccines, and one of the participants, who was actually a doctor, actually died from the vaccine. However, it could be that there's some type of carriers, there's additional substances that were used in that vaccine, but nevertheless, someone actually died. They did not have any underlying or pre-existing conditions. Of course, it's under investigation. Of course, there's also Russian Sputnik vaccine, which is not mentioned by Donald Trump, but interestingly enough, it is being tested in US and Chicago. So there was actually volunteers being requested on Facebook for that vaccine. Nevertheless, as much as people say they're successful, it still has not entered all the needed information. And also it was rushed because in order for a vaccine to be called a vaccine, you have to go through 3 stages of trials. It only had 2 stages of trials. Russia bypassed it to actually, for any standard, to make it a vaccine because it did not have 3, and this is a 3-step happening now. But nevertheless, the problem with such action, you don't know the possible side effects, and I would not trust Russia with any data provided as well as far as what is the adverse effects, because Russia has always been very quiet, and even during Soviet Union, same goes for China, releasing any information. And to point out exactly too, the true numbers of coronavirus in Moscow could be very questionable. Right now, people are actually forced to work from home in Moscow, and there's many restrictions. However, for the Western purposes, this information is not released. And even last year, I think the number of deaths, and that was actually released, but none confirmed, of course, they were much higher. I did an article had actual data from the Russian government, and if you compare what's reported versus, there's a difference. If someone is interested for that data, I will post it underneath this video as well. But let's get back to American debates. So clearly Trump stating there's going to be a vaccine in 2 weeks is pretty much impossible. By the end of the year, highly unlikely. It is possible that the vaccine will be available by next summer. However, many times happens, and I mean, I'm not a doctor, but sometimes pandemics, including SARS, but this one has been a little different, go away too. So it is plausible by next year this virus could outlive itself in a certain way. But again, I'm not a doctor, therefore I cannot make any claims of such nature. At this time, everybody should wear a mask. They should be very vigilant. Social distancing is important. For now, for example, Toronto right now is at phase 2, modified, but there's a lot of restrictions because it's identified as a hotspot. So there's many factors. But okay, next topic is the debate. Obviously, Biden said that he believes in masks, more precaution, and it is wise and measured response. This is how it should be done. However, it is true that you cannot completely shut off economy because at the end it's going to create even more problems, including small businesses. So Biden's approach of shutting everything might not be exactly the right one either. But again, this is more of a speculation because Biden never said that he's going to shut down everything, but more for safety reasons. Trump elaborated on his thought with that. So again, this is one of those things. I do believe at that point Biden is more measured and actually has a clear response versus when Trump promises things. Next topic was the tax returns that were brought up. And ironically enough, and obviously Biden released all his tax records, it was not an issue. Trump made a very interesting point, which is very hard to believe, therefore, and I can't say because I don't know clearly because he never released any of his statements as far as his taxes are concerned, that he said he prepaid ahead for knowing how much taxes he's going to have. But yet in the same sentence he says he wants to release them, but at the same time he needs to resolve some issues with IRS. So usually when you have to resolve issues with IRS, which is obviously, taxes, you would have an issue, because if you've been prepaying, how would you have any issues with IRS? You would be like pretty much their favorite taxpayer, and if you're constantly prepaying and have all these funds, you would love to release and show even previous ones, because for example, Biden released 20 years worth, so you would think something like that. So that type of statement in prepaid seems to me more of social engineering propaganda comment of how vigilant and proactive he's paying American taxes, which is highly likely. Well, it's very hard to believe in many factors. Majority of businessmen actually have offshore accounts and try to avoid paying taxes as much as possible, especially on his level. And nevertheless, also that was brought up by Biden and others, and Trump did admit that he did have account in China for his business, but I mean, yes, as a businessman, especially having dealings, that's plausible too. But nevertheless, prepaid taxes, highly unlikely. Now, this is where it gets interesting. There's a lot of times, and it was mentioned before, Russia, of course. And Biden mentioned, of course, the whole thing about Russia and intelligence community believing that what Trump is saying is more of what Russian propaganda is, etc. Well, yes and no. What I will say about that, and this is of course my opinion because I cannot state anything otherwise. I remember reading that, and that was right in the cusp of 2016 presidential election. It was reported in Siberian Times right before Trump announced campaign, and everybody thought it was more of a joke, him running at the time, or maybe again, I'm just generalizing, but this is what's saying. Siberian Times posted a series of articles saying that Trump Corp is bidding and going to be responsible of building casino resorts in Siberian region, which Putin decided to create a similar offshore gambling zone that Macau has. So this has been all over the news, and Siberia keeps developing. They built another cosmodrome there. They're building a lot of cities and putting them there. Some of them closed off for defense, but a lot of it, like I said, gambling zone that meant to be for tourism too, clearly. And suddenly, when Trump won the election, all those articles, you cannot find them anymore. And Siberian Times actually have articles in English too. It's not just Russian. But if you look them up, you cannot locate that information. So it makes you wonder if Trump was going to build it. It's very hard to believe that suddenly Russia would give it to someone else. And especially knowing the Trump organization is responsible, and this is what they do. They do real estate and they do build such facilities. And at the time, they're one of the biggest known ones because, again, Trump before his election was known as a businessman, etc. So nevertheless, so that kind of information. So clearly, even at the time, he's a businessman, but he liked having dealings with Russia. And also, one thing about Russia, when you win any giant contracts, for example, or if anybody awards you a contract in Russia, one thing, you have to be favorable with the Russian government. It is the only way. It doesn't matter if you're a private entity, it doesn't matter if you're from the Western world, you have to be favorable with Russian government. So there's no way it's possible to have any Western business in Russia without having connection to some government officials, either on the level of municipal level, especially Sobyanin for Moscow. But as far as Siberia, it would be Siberia region. And Siberian region, of course, is going to be United Russia Party because that's a stronghold there, even though lately there has been a lot of changes like Khabarovsk and everything else with LDPR and the whole situation with Sergei Furgov. We keep mentioning it, but it's not the scope of this debate. But nevertheless, the situation there is, even if it is LDPR opposition, it's a useful opposition. Therefore, you still have to have that contact. And I'm not saying anyone automatically becomes an agent of Russia. No. That's not what I'm saying at all. And it does not mean automatically that suddenly you're pro-Putin and supporting Putin. But nevertheless, to do business there, you have to meet or you have to have some type of connection, especially on the level of Trump. But nevertheless, I'm not saying that Trump was ever a Russian agent. I'm never saying that. I'm not going to go by any hearsay, even though I think United States intelligence community is one of the smartest ones, more successful ones. They've done an amazing job, and U.S. is still number one. CIA did so much amazing things, And overall, and that's what we know because a lot of it is classified, but the ones that were released are pretty much at all what it takes and dedication for those professionals. And I think what they do to keep the country safe is absolutely wonderful and keep us safe in North America, which is huge with everything that's been going on from terrorism and, a lot of things happen. The Patriot Act, because of the attacks that happened 9/11, there's a lot of things like that. So I'm actually at all, what they do, and everybody should be proud of that. But nevertheless, what I'm possibly, and this is my opinion again, so I'm being subjective at this point, I do believe that Trump, a lot of things he says would be something similar in line with Russian leadership would think on a certain level, of course, not on every level, because I know sometimes Trump makes those kind of statements which, well, U.S. has better hypersonic weapons technology, and, well, even though U.S. started it before Russia, Putin does put a lot of things into the new hypersonic technology. I did a video on that. If somebody's interested, I'll leave a link for that as well. But nevertheless, he does make some outlet, but usually it's talk. He talks a lot. He likes to tweet. He's been a very different kind of president as far as social media, no filter. For some, it's appealing. For others, it's not an eloquent speaker, etc. But nevertheless, for the purposes back of this debate, a lot of statements he's making, like I said, it's something that a Russian municipal individual would approve, and I'm not saying that they made him say it, it's just his viewpoint. And it could plausible even for me to believe that the reason he has such viewpoints because he's been dealing with Russia for a long time. He had business interests in Russia. It does not make him a Russian agent. It does not make him, supporting Russian geopolitical interests. No, because he's an American at the end of the day. But it seems to me, it's like anything. If you spend some time in certain culture for a long time, or you have business with them, you start identifying with that culture one way or another. It doesn't matter what country you're from. This is why for myself, I could never identify as Russian because my home is North America. I believe in West, my interests are pro-Western. I love West. This is my home, and I would not ever risk any security of my home overall. So for me, and I've never been to Russia anyways. My background, my parents, but even then, I've never been there. So nevertheless, let's get back to debates. Another topic that was made was about raising the minimum wage. Trump said that he would consider it. Joe Biden says $15. Well, Canada raised the minimum wage, and it created a lot of backlash, especially from businesses. It also depends which regions. There's a difference having minimum wage like that in California versus different states because different states, and I do agree that it should be left to the states. But nevertheless, this was just part of the topic. One of the other main topic was immigration, and Joe Biden said that DACA would have possibilities of having passive citizenship if he's elected. Trump pointed out that while Biden was vice president under Obama, there wasn't as much done, but there was a DACA Act passed, so it's not really true. Overall, the biggest one is climate change, and to me, I think that is very careless. Well, the economy is not doing as good because, we don't allow things, or we don't want to expand things that are actually damaging to the environment. Well, environment, this is where we live. This is where we breathe. You can get sick if you have bad environment. This is what happens to China because China doesn't care for its citizens. It doesn't care for habitat. It doesn't care for anyone. You have smog where you can't even breathe. And I'm sure there's high numbers of cancer. China just not releasing like Russia because, it's closed countries. Like, they release what they like, but they're horrible for the environment. So nevertheless, this is the biggest one and a difference on. Also, Joe Biden seems to be more level-headed as far as helping middle class and families, as far as everybody should afford health care. Obviously, everybody knows I come from a country which is Canada. We do have affordable health care, and we do have free health care. There's not everything that's offered. I believe that there should be two. I think there should be paying options and higher paying options if people have the funds and they want to go that route. But I think there should be available other options for everybody else. And it's not that healthcare is the right to my point. I think it is actually better from economy. And the reason behind economy perspective, because if you have people that are healthy, they can work, they can be more productive. It's less burden on society in the long term anyways because they could be contributing more. Overall, it's better for other resources because when you're sick, your mental health suffers too. There's a lot of factors that come into play. Also, if you're diagnosed early and caught early with certain diseases, you could actually be treated successfully and in short term where someone could have a good quality of life and it will not impact their whole families and it could actually, again, be productive member of society. So if you look at it from Trump's perspective, because he says economy, stock market, it is actually better for economy to have it. But I'm not saying that everything should be free. Everything that's free is not always good. Canada has a lot of flaws with its healthcare. I can do a video if anybody's interested discussing my points because I came to US to have surgery in 2015, correct? My knee surgery was in 2015 because in Canada, number one, the wait list as far as MRI and also the procedure wasn't available. So yeah, there's certain factors on that topic, and I did not have an option. And in fact that I'm still pretty young, not having an option or not having surgery in time, it could have left me worse off than I was, etc. Okay, and I'm not going to go further into detail, but nevertheless, I do believe that. And Bernie Sanders had a plan pertaining to that as well. But like I said, I think there should be different options. And it's great that Biden says that he could have Biden care piggybacking off Obamacare. As far as Obamacare, because I've read a lot about it, I've known people who used it and not used it. Some people were against it because certain factors in it, but again, there's no perfect system. You can only try so many times and perfect it. America is one of the richest countries in the world and one of the few countries that does not have options of that nature. Not everything should be private. Not everything, and even if it is private, there should be affordable options given. There's possibility to have certain private hospitals or certain healthcare plans subsidized by the government where people could have it cheaper, and this is part of it too. So that was one of the main reasons. Now, nevertheless, as far as the race issues are concerned, I don't get into those discussions whatsoever. I do believe everything should have equality. They should have a right to education. They should have a right to be free and feel safe. Outside of that, I would not go further into that spectrum. If anyone would like to discuss it or go further into spectrum, I welcome that. But personally, I do not enter that. I would just tell you one thing. Personally, having an accent, I have encountered certain experiences, even though looking at me, you would not think that I've had some negative experiences pertaining to that in my lifetime, but they weren't as challenging, but they were surprising, and I actually handled them. But obviously, I'm a pretty vocal individual, and I believe I can stand up for myself. But I have experienced having an accent and certain people assuming things that were completely not true. Like, for example, they thought possibly I came to the country recently, for example, or since I wasn't born in Canada, they believe that there's certain things as far as the level of education I have received, etc. But anyways. So yes, that's important. As far as immigrant children separated and everything like that, and refugees, that was one another topics of debates. And in that case, nobody should be separated, but it's a very tough issue because Canada does not have the same issue pertaining to certain type of migrants, and refugees are a little bit different there because a lot of times in Canada, refugees are privately sponsored and they're usually from war-torn countries, a little bit different than Latin America coming in. So I could not comment because I don't have enough experience actually commenting on that, so that topic I would skip. But overall, the debate as far as Biden versus Trump, I think Biden is more level-headed. There's certain only things I don't like, and it's not that I don't like or anything like that, because clearly I think Biden is much more level-headed overall as far as the discussion. But Trump has his support base where they like how he handles things. But at the end of the day, the only thing that I find the point that comes up every time, and Trump brought up, is Ukraine. And Ukraine is one of those topics. And Ukraine is like a black hole. It's a corrupt nation, former Soviet bloc, except a few countries like Baltic states, as far as like Lithuania, Estonia, and Latvia are okay. Georgia is okay, but majority of them are very corrupt. Super corrupt nations, doesn't matter which political power, they'll sell themselves for anything. They will take Western money, claim that they're oppressed, but in reality of it, a lot of people don't like to work. The country is corrupt, the government takes money, doesn't matter if it's the actor, people's servant Zelensky or Poroshenko, the chocolate king, or everybody else that comes along there too. So to be honest, that point shouldn't even be in the debates, in my opinion, for U.S. presidential election. Even though, yes, Biden's son, Burisma, and everything like Burisma, and everything like that, and there's leaks which are unsubstantiated about that involvement. But again, every time you see that, it's also possible in tampering into U.S. elections. Really, I wouldn't take it as much clout at the end of the day. If you had to compare Trump's children and Biden's children, and I mean, as far as even alone, Kushner, his son-in-law, being involved in politics as he did, that's a whole story and a half. So I don't think Trump has anything to say on Biden's children or his son, because look at Trump's children. So in reality of it too, and at the end of the day, someone's child, even though they're adults, they shouldn't be a fair game unless they're involved in politics. So clearly, actually, and Biden had more class because he doesn't bring up Trump's children, but because Trump's daughter and sons are involved in his campaign and politics, Biden could say because they're adults, they're fair game in that sense. But Biden's are not involved in politics as far as running or having a public position, which are, in that kind of level. So nevertheless, overall debate was expected, obviously, due to muting, it was a little bit more civil this time around. but Trump was going on a tangent to a lot of topics, and moderator was great. She handled it perfectly and flawlessly. Trump kept going on tangents when he was asked a lot of questions. Overall, would love to know what everybody thinks. Please click like, please subscribe to my channel, and I hope you do support me, your fellow Canadian who just wants everybody to be happy and hoping everybody can have at least part of free healthcare, or at least, affordable healthcare and more things, because we're all people of the world. And even though I do believe in borders and boundaries, I still do believe that there's humanity. So again, please click like and subscribe, and I hope everybody has the rest of a great evening. Thank you for watching.